Hey guys, lovely to meet you. Good to see you guys again. Good to see you, Tessa and Ruth. This is our first time. I've been
Hi,
such
how
a
are
fan.
you?
I remember watching you in a preacher. Loved it. Loved
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I miss Tulip.
yeah. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Thanks, Steve.
Um, this film was really interesting. I didn't know what to expect. I literally just finished watching it just now on
Oh
Netflix,
wow.
and I was just like, it's such an important yet emotional subject matter. How did you guys prepare for such an intense role?
Well, we had like the we had the novel,
Mhm.
which was like a sort of Bible. Do you know what I mean? For kind of when you have like that kind of source material, it's so brilliant because you can go back and you can use observations
Yes,
that
yeah,
the writer made about your characters in a really practical way. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like there's some gems about like the way they walk or where they stand. And for Claire, it was like her intense gaze. Do you know what I mean? And it felt very much like I kept seeing lighthouses. And her name, Claire, it's Claire de la
Mm,
Lune, it's light,
mhm.
and so when you have like the source material like that, it's really like juicy for a little, you know, I suppose, practical hints at how they move, but also like um, psychologically they're kind of laid bare. Although with Claire, I suppose it's kind of a biased look at her because it's through obviously the eyes of Irene, but it's
Yeah,
still helpful nonetheless.
yeah. Tessa, what was it like preparing for
Yeah,
Irene?
I couldn't agree more in terms of like I know probably for some actors, maybe if they're doing an adaptation of the book, I've spoken to some people who maybe haven't even read the book, because they
Mhm.
want to sort of form their own I don't know, relationship to the character or something. But for me, it was entirely my way in. I just continuously read the book while we were working. And as Ruth
Mhm.
said, there's so many beautiful hints, and
Mhm.
particularly for Irene, because the novella is not written in first person, but it's very from her perspective. So Nella tells you so much about what she's thinking, what she's feeling, what she's smelling. It's such a sort of sensual, sensorial experience reading
Mhm.
the book through her. So I really loved that. It was a way to score, because there's so much that happens, that is subtextual, that you don't that
Yeah,
that Irene doesn't give voice to. And
yeah.
so it's very fun, kind of in a prescriptive way sometimes, to score my script with like, oh, these are the things that Irene is thinking. It felt like playing a piece of music. And I've never,
Yeah,
I mean, the closest would be like if you're performing Shakespeare or something that has real, I don't know,
yeah.
rhythm, something objective about it
Mm.
inside of all its subjectivity. And that kind of felt like this. And then there was so much, it was really fun also because Ruth was already cast,
Yeah.
had been attached to the project. So even when I was reading the novella, I was imagining Ruth, like I could see her. So even in my prep, and we had just met in passing at a couple parties, but I was thinking of her so much. And I'm playing a character that is obsessed with thinking of her, that feels her presence even when she's gone. And so I could do that for like the 2 years or a year and a half before we made the film. She was a presence to me as I was preparing, which is really unique.
Yeah.
I
I
love
really
that what
liked
you said about the score. That's really lovely.
Hmm.
Totally,
I
that
re
totally is what it was like. Sorry, son.
no, it's all right. It's all right. I really love the imagery as well. Like there was moments where you can tell that it was quite intense, or there was moments where you can feel Irene just be like, she didn't say much, but her mind and her facial expressions could be like, "Oh gosh, why is Claire's hair?" But you can feel the anticipation, you can feel the anxiety as well. And I just love the fact that how well you guys work together on screen. This is Rebecca Hall's directional debut. What was it like working with her?
Amazing.
Hmm.
I feel like, I don't say this very often, but like she was fated to do this. I feel like the universe chose her big finger came down, pointed down on her.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, I think we were all like a bit kind of baffled as to why this hadn't been made into a film before, because it's perfect. I mean, it's so psychologically excavates two humans so brilliantly and disarmingly, and their complexity is laid bare. It's like waiting to be filmed. But of course, you know, it's a novel that centers two Black women, and it's a period piece, so that kind of explains it. But you know, Rebecca's always wanted to direct, and she has that combination of like the intellectual aptitude, and also she's super in touch with her instincts and her intuition as a performer. So all of those things together, along with like this sort of personal investment, due to her kind of family history with passing, because, you know, she found out that her grandfather passed, her mother's father.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of a secret, but not a secret. And so this was her way of sort of, I suppose, investigating that and welcoming that discussion into her life. And so it felt very fated. And I just felt so privileged that she asked me to be a part of it. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that also sort of, you know, when you, that meant we all had skin in the game, you know, and that's super key. It's, you know, and you know, there is an extra pressure you feel when you're playing someone who has, you know, traditionally been marginalized, you know. There is that pressure, you know, there is. I feel it anyway. And maybe I shouldn't, but, you know, you want to get it right. So, you know, you don't want to, it's unfortunate, but you just feel that pressure because it hasn't been that many stories told like this, you know, and you don't want to be the one to fuck it up, do you?
I mean, both of you being women of color, what did you take away personally on your journey starring in Passing?
I think just something that really struck me, and I think we've both sort of spoken about this, is how could this not have been a film before? I didn't know about the novella, didn't know about Nella and her legacy, and so I think it really made me question how things get to be canon, and how many of our stories have been excluded. And I think that's something that is really resonant for me, that has made me, I mean, I've always been interested anyways in producing and telling stories and try to leverage whatever platform I had. But it makes me really, I don't know, doubly excited to really celebrate Black women in particular, authors that are making work now.
Yeah.
And being like, we need to canonize these pieces of work now. Yeah. The idea of waiting 100 years, you know, for Nella to get her flowers, so to speak, like, for me, it's like I feel a renewed importance in that we have to value our own stories, or by hook or by crook decide that they're important and then they need to be told. I think that's something that I just have taken away. Feels even more important to me, I guess.
Yeah. What are some of the changes or key changes that you would like to see happen in Hollywood in terms of racial equality? I mean, we've come a long way, and there is some green light in some of, obviously, us playing more of an important role and seeing a lot more faces of color in important places. But what else do you feel like could change now that's quite imminent?
Well, we talk a lot about having people from, you know, previously marginalized communities and marginalized communities now having a place in every aspect of filmmaking, you know, where if it's on the floor, you know, doing the lighting, whether it's producing, whether it's in the halls of power, do you know what I mean? And that's really important, because, you know, you got to figure out where the power is, don't you? And getting there, because that's super important. And you don't want things to be just for show, you know, and lip service happens all the time, do you know what I mean? And it's about following through and following up on promises, you know, and all this support and allyship, you know, it has to come to fruition. It can't just be like jumping on some sort of bandwagon, you know, because I know that's really cynical, but it's happened before. And, you know, so kind of like, I feel like this comes in waves, and that's just not good enough. Like, it needs sustained effort and pressure.
I totally agree. This film is getting a lot of Oscar buzz. What are your thoughts around that?
I mean, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
When would that be a bad thing?
Exactly. Of course.
It's sort of like this year in particular, there's so much happening that, like, you're in very good company if you're nominated, and you're also in very good company if you're not. So
yeah.
That's so true. That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
But I mean, that's
really true.
That's always the case. And obviously you're like, do this for awards, but like, it's especially the case this year just because there's like 18 million thousand and there's so many brilliant performances. There's so many, like, you know, whatever. So you're kind of like, what can you do, you know?
What can you do? I'm going to round this off on my last question, because I know we've got a couple minutes left. Audience alike around the world that are going to be tuning in, watching this. Of course, Netflix streams to many countries. What would you want your audience to take away from this? To take away from the message, the delivery, your performances? What would you want your audience to take away from this?
So you put it beautifully. Was it last Thursday about, like, and it's so true that there's a lot of ambiguity in the novel, and Rebecca was very faithful to that, because, and I feel this really strongly ever since I was a kid, you know, it's you know, sometimes it's lovely to have a story wrapped up and you can float away and thinking, well, that's great, or kind of like, I don't know, have a good old cathartic weep. But with this, there's so much ambiguity that it's sort of, you take and you choose what has resonated with you, you know? And, you know, this resonates on some level with everybody. And yet it doesn't it's not a neat ending, do you know what I mean? And what you take away from it and what lingers is sort of revealing about oneself, I think. Do you know what I mean? And also, when something lingers and stays with you, I don't know, there's something about that for me, it means it's super powerful, and that it's changing something in me, like for a perspective or, you know, some sort of empathic connection. And I think that's what all art is actually supposed to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think that I could express it better either. I also think, I don't know, there's one of the things that I love about what both Nella does and our film aims to do is talk about sometimes the chasm between who you know yourself to be and who you think you ought to be, what society tells you you need to be. And we know that none of us fit too squarely in any container. We're bound, if we're honest with ourselves, to spill out the sides.
Of course.
And I think now more than ever, obviously there's still so much that puts us into certain parameters, but we are thankfully living in a time where our ideas around race, gender, all of those things are sort of eroding And there's more fluidity and flexibility for people to show up and be their real authentic selves. And that's exciting. And so I would say like, that's something I also hope audiences could be left with, you know, because Ruth's character, I think, is someone who could not exist as the fullest expression of herself, and nor could Irene, for very different reasons, some imposed by self and some imposed by society. And so I guess I would say like, if audiences could leave with one feeling, is like, I want to rid myself of that and be able to be the fullest expression of myself. Because why not? We only have this one life to live, and we're living inside of a time where arguably we should be able to get closer to it at least.
Thank you, both of you. Ruth, it was lovely to meet you, to officially meet you. Tessa, always a pleasure. Love you always. Thank you guys. Thank you for your time.